Diane Ladd was Hollywood's ultimate survivor. She survived divorce, single motherhood, and a poison that doctors said would kill her. She fought death and won because she had to live for her daughter, Laura Dern. But in late 2025, something changed. When her husband, Robert Hunter, took his final breath in July, the fire inside Diane simply went out. Just 3 months later, she followed him. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a choice. This is the awful ending and tragic death of a woman who decided she could not live without her soulmate. The woman who refused to break. To understand the magnitude of her final surrender, we must first measure the strength of her resistance. For 89 years, Diane Ladd refused to be a victim. She arrived in Hollywood in an era when women were expected to be pretty, silent, and compliant. She was none of those things. She was loud. She was opinionated. She was Southern steel wrapped in velvet. She didn't play the game. She rewrote it. While other actresses were chasing the spotlight, starving themselves to fit into sample sizes, and marrying producers for clout, Diane was interested in the truth. She played waitresses. She played mothers. She played women who were tired, broken, and real. In Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, she didn't just act. She bled. She showed the world that a woman's worth wasn't in her beauty, but in her resilience. She wasn't interested in being a mannequin. She wanted to be a map of the human experience. She fought directors who wanted her to smile more. She fought producers who wanted her to be softer. She wore her scars like jewelry. And she understood early on that Hollywood is a factory that grinds women down to dust. If you want to survive, you have to be harder than the machine. She refused to let the industry define her age or her value. When the roles dried up for older women, she wrote her own books. She created her own path. But Hollywood hates resilience. Hollywood loves vulnerability. It loves to see a star fall so it can sell the comeback. Diane refused to fall. Even when her first marriage to Bruce Dern collapsed, leaving her as a single mother to a young Laura Dern, she didn't crumble. She worked. She took bad jobs. She took small roles. She did whatever she had to do to put food on the table. She taught Laura that fame is a vapor, but integrity is solid. She built a fortress around her daughter, protecting her from the predators and the drug culture that consumed so many other celebrity children. She was the unshakable mountain. She survived the death of her first daughter, Diane Elizabeth, who drowned as a toddler, a tragedy that would have destroyed a lesser woman. She survived the rejection of the industry as she aged. She survived the loneliness of the road. She was the woman who could not be killed, or so we thought. We looked at Diane Ladd, and we saw a force of nature. We assumed she would live forever because she was too stubborn to die. But we forgot that even mountains can be eroded. We forgot that strength is not an infinite resource. And we didn't realize that her strength wasn't coming from ambition or vanity. It was coming from love. And once the object of that love was removed, the mountain would turn to dust. The miracle that defied medicine. There's a specific chapter in Diane's life that makes her final death so shocking. It is the secret sauce of her biography, the moment she beat the Reaper. Years ago, Diane faced a medical crisis that should have ended her story. She was diagnosed with a severe lung condition, exacerbated by heavy metal poisoning from a film set. The doctors were blunt. They were cold. They told her she had 6 months to live. They told her to write her will. They told her to say goodbye to Laura. It wasn't just a cough. It was systemic failure. The heavy metals from the set design had leached into her bloodstream, shutting down her organs one by one. Her skin turned gray. Her energy evaporated. Every breath felt like inhaling broken glass. She was drowning in her own body. The doctors showed her the x-rays. They showed her the damage. They explained with scientific detachment that her lungs were turning to stone. Most people would have accepted the diagnosis. They would have gone home to hospice care. But Diane felt a fire in her belly that medicine couldn't explain. In the sterile world of modern medicine, a prognosis is a verdict. But Diane Ladd didn't believe in verdicts. She believed in will. She looked at those doctors and she said, "No." Why? Because Laura needed her. Laura was building her career. Laura was navigating the treacherous waters of fame. Laura was her baby. The maternal instinct in Diane was stronger than the poison in her lungs. She went to war with her own body. She walked every day. At first, she could only walk to the mailbox. She gasped for air. Her lungs burned like fire. But she did it again the next day. And the next, she engaged in alternative therapies. She meditated. She prayed. She and Laura walked together, talking, breathing, fighting. Those walks became the basis of their book, Honey, Baby, Mine. But more importantly, they were a ritual of survival. Diane forced her body to heal through sheer stubbornness. She proved the doctors wrong. She lived for another decade. She was a medical miracle. The industry applauded her. They called her a fighter. They used her story as inspiration porn, a feel-good segment on morning talk shows. Look at Diane Ladd. She beat the odds. But they missed the point. She didn't beat the odds because she loved life. She beat the odds because she loved her daughter. It was an act of service. She stayed alive because her job wasn't done yet. But in 2025, the dynamic changed. Laura was grown. Laura was an Oscar winner. Laura was a mother herself. Laura was safe. And Diane found herself facing a new enemy. One that she couldn't walk away from. One that she didn't want to fight. Grief. Finding peace in a chaotic world. In 1999, Diane found the final piece of her puzzle. Robert Charles Hunter. He wasn't a movie star. He wasn't a director chasing young starlets. He was a businessman, an executive, a man of structure, silence, and dignity. In a town full of narcissists, Robert was a grown-up. He didn't care about the red carpets. He didn't care about the applause. He cared about Diane. He saw the woman behind the legend. He saw the exhausted single mother who had spent 40 years fighting the world, and he offered her something she had never had, a place to rest. With Robert, Diane didn't have to be the great Diane Ladd. She could just be a wife. They built a life that was quiet. They didn't go to the parties. They stayed home. They cooked. They read books. They traveled. They founded a company together. But their real project was their marriage. They developed a private language, a shorthand of touch, a hand on a shoulder in the kitchen, a glance across a crowded room that said, "I'm here." Robert was the only person who could tell Diane to slow down. He was the only one who could make her stop working and just sit still. He brought her coffee in the morning. He listened to her stories about the old days of Hollywood without judgment in a world of public performances. Their marriage was the only private thing she had left. It was a sanctuary, a garden they watered every day. For 26 years, he was the first face she saw in the morning and the last face she saw at night. For 26 years, Robert was her anchor. When Hollywood ignored her, Robert adored her. When the critics were cruel, Robert was kind. When her body ached from age and old injuries, Robert held her. He was the buffer between her and the brutality of the world. He allowed her to soften. The steel exterior she had built to survive the industry began to melt, revealing the gentle soul underneath. They grew old together. And in a culture that treats aging like a disease, they treated it like a privilege. They embraced the wrinkles. They embraced the slower pace. They were a team, a single organism with two hearts. But the problem with becoming a single organism is that you cannot survive if half of you is cut away. In early 2025, Robert's health began to fail. The details were kept private. They didn't sell the story to the tabloids. They didn't ask for pity on Instagram. They handled it the way they handled everything. Together, in silence, Diane became the nurse, the caretaker. She watched the man who had been her rock slowly crumble into dust. It was a slow, agonizing torture, but she did it without complaint. She poured every ounce of her remaining strength into keeping him comfortable. She was fighting death again, but this time it wasn't for herself. It was for him. The day the light went out. July 2025. The summer sun was shining in California, but inside the Hunter Ladd home, the world had gone cold. Robert Charles Hunter passed away. He was gone. The silence he left behind was absolute. When the news broke, the industry sent flowers. They sent notes. So sorry for your loss. He was a good man. They treated it as a sad event, but a normal one. People die. Life goes on. Hollywood moves on to the next premiere. But they didn't understand what had really happened. They didn't understand that when Robert died, Diane died too. She stood at his funeral, looking elegant, looking strong. She held Laura's hand. She nodded at the condolences. But behind her sunglasses, her eyes were empty. The survivor was gone. The fighter had left the building. Diane Ladd went back to their empty house, and she looked at the chair where he used to sit. She looked at the bed where he used to sleep, and she realized a terrifying truth. She was done. The house felt too big. The air felt too thin. She would walk into a room and forget why she was there. She would reach for the phone to call him, only to remember he couldn't answer. It was a physical sensation of amputation. She told a friend, "I feel like I'm walking underwater. Everything is slow. Everything is heavy." The grief wasn't just emotional. It was biological. Her body, which had fought so hard to stay alive for him, suddenly had no purpose. The adrenaline of being his caretaker was gone, replaced by a crushing, infinite exhaustion. She had fought for Laura. She had fought for her career. She had fought for her health. She had fought for Robert. She had been fighting for 89 years. And now she was tired. Not just need a nap, tired, but so deep tired. The exhaustion of a soldier who has fought 100 wars and is finally standing on a battlefield with no enemies left, but no friends either. Laura Dern tried to save her. She saw the light fading in her mother's eyes. She tried to use the old playbook. "Come on, Mom. Let's go for a walk. Let's write another book. Let's do a movie." She tried to reignite the spark that had saved Diane 10 years ago. But the spark was wet. It wouldn't catch. Diane looked at her daughter, the daughter she adored, the daughter she had stayed alive for, and she smiled a sad, distant smile. She didn't explain. She didn't argue. She just drifted. The slow fade into silence. The 3 months between July and November 2025 were the longest 3 months in history. To the outside world, Diane Ladd was just grieving. "Give her time," they said. "She'll bounce back." She always bounces back. But inside the house, a slow-motion tragedy was unfolding. Diane didn't have a new terminal diagnosis. She didn't have a sudden heart attack. She simply stopped. She stopped eating with appetite. She stopped engaging with the news. She stopped planning for the future. In medicine, they call it failure to thrive. In poetry, they call it a broken heart. But in reality, it was a conscious uncoupling from life. Medical science has a name for this: Takotsubo cardiomyopathy, stress-induced cardiomyopathy. The stress hormones from intense grief can literally stun the heart muscle, changing its shape, making it unable to pump effectively. Diane's heart didn't stop because it was diseased. It stopped because it was overwhelmed by the absence of its rhythm. Robert was her heartbeat. Without him, her body simply forgot how to work. It forgot why it needed to breathe. She spent her days looking at the garden they planted together, watching the leaves turn brown and fall, feeling a kinship with the winter coming on. She wasn't oppressed in the loud, crying sense. She was peaceful. She was a woman packing her bags for a trip she had been delaying for too long. She spent her days looking at photos of Robert. She spoke to him as if he were in the room. "I'll be there soon," she would whisper. Laura Dern watched this with a breaking heart. She realized that she was losing her mother, not to a disease, but to a love that was stronger than the will to survive. She realized that she couldn't compete with a ghost. No amount of daughterly love could fill the void left by a husband. It forces us to ask a difficult question. Is it selfish to leave? Or is it the ultimate act of loyalty? We live in a world that tells us to fight, fight, fight. Never give up. Stay strong. But Diane Ladd had fought enough. She had earned her rest. She decided that a life without Robert was not a life she was interested in living. It wasn't a tragedy of despair. It was a tragedy of devotion. By late October, she was bedridden. Her body, which had defied medical science a decade ago, now surrendered without a fight. The doctors couldn't find a specific cause strong enough to kill her. Her heart was just slowing down. Her lungs were taking shallower breaths. She was unplugging herself from the world, one wire at a time. The final reunion. November 3rd, 2025. 90 days after Robert left, Diane Ladd lay in her bed in California. The room was quiet. Laura was there. The grandchildren were there. Diane wasn't in pain. She wasn't afraid. She looked peaceful. She looked young. She closed her eyes, and she didn't open them again. The official statement said she died of illness. But we know the truth. Diane Ladd didn't die of an illness. She died of a promise. She promised, till death do us part. And when death parted them, she fixed it by dying too. When the news broke, Hollywood posted their tributes. A legend, a powerhouse, an icon. They talked about her Oscars. They talked about her movies. But they missed the point. They missed the greatest performance of her life. Her final exit. She didn't leave the stage because she was pushed. She left the stage because the leading man had gone home, and the play didn't make sense without him. Laura Dern released a statement expressing her profound grief. But underneath the sorrow, there must have been a sense of understanding. She knew her mother. She knew that Diane Ladd did exactly what she wanted to do. She went to find Robert. A love story written in tears. The story of Diane Ladd and Robert Hunter is not a Hollywood story. Hollywood stories are about ego, about legacy, about immortality. This is a human story. It is a story about the fragility of life and the terrifying power of love. We spend our lives searching for a love that consumes us, but we rarely talk about the cost of finding it. The cost is that when it's gone, you are ruined. Diane Ladd paid that price willingly. She leaves behind a legacy of brilliance on screen, but her true legacy is the silence she chose at the end. She proved that awards don't matter. Money doesn't matter. Fame is dust. The only thing that matters is the hand you hold in the dark. She is no longer the survivor. She is the reunited. We can imagine them now, Diane and Robert, somewhere where the cameras can't follow. He is waiting for her. She walks into the room. He smiles, and the scene fades to black. What do you think? Is it beautiful or tragic that she couldn't live without him? And do you think true love always ends in a broken heart? Let us know in the comments below. Rest in peace, Diane. You don't have to fight anymore. This is the Seventh Lens. Thank you for watching.